In Consumer Watch, when sick people cannot pay for their treatment, some hospitals are not shy about seizing patients' tax returns and garnishing their wages, in addition to collecting interest on top of the initial medical bill. But as CBS News national correspondent Anna Werner found out, some hospitals now even sue patients to collect their medical bills.
At their T-shirt screen printing company outside Dothan, Alabama, Daryl and Casey Roberts are struggling to stay afloat.
How's it going?
Slow. Businesses are closing. People are not making money like they used to be.
In 2015, the couple found they could no longer afford health insurance. Casey said she had a choice between paying the premiums or taking her son out of college.
I wanted my son to have a better life than I had. So what do you do as a parent? You sacrifice.
Casey says she'd been healthy, but in May of 2016, she had an attack of severe abdominal pain.
When I say I felt like I was dying, I felt like I was dying.
Her husband rushed her to local Flowers Hospital.
The doctor told me she needs to have this surgery now.
Her appendix was about to burst. She needed an emergency appendectomy. A few weeks later, the Roberts got the doctor's bills, which didn't surprise them. They came to a little under $3,000. But then the hospital's bill arrived. The charge, over $52,000. Even with a supposed discount for uninsured patients like Roberts, the total still came to about $31,000.
I thought it was crazy. That's a house in Alabama in this area. That's a house.
But she and her husband still paid the hospital what they could, $25 a month for nearly 3 years.
As long as I can work and they'll accept payments, we're going to pay, because everything that we've ever had in life, we've paid for.
Yes.
Then in September of 2019, the hospital sued them for the entire balance plus interest. The total, nearly $37,000. At that point, Casey says,
I told my husband, I wish you to let me die.
How can you even think that?
I've told my husband this. I've said, honey, I love you and I love my family, but if you have let me go, today you would not be going through this.
But what she says she didn't know was that original $31,000 bill was likely much higher than what she would have paid if she'd had insurance, and some $25,000 more than what Medicare would be charged by a hospital on average for an appendectomy, just $5,800.
It's like they're taking advantage of people who don't have insurance. And I say you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Why would you even do that?
And they're not the only ones Flowers Hospital has sued. CBS News found last year the for-profit hospital sued more than 1,500 people. It's not clear whether all the lawsuits were over medical bills. But in one letter to the court, a mother of 3 wrote with her $11 an hour paycheck, she couldn't afford the over $11,000 bill for emergency treatment.
I think it's despicable.
Attorney Christy Kirkland works on those kinds of cases at the nonprofit legal services of Alabama.
They're going to be paying it forever, or at least for a very, very long time. This is not a debt that they're going to be able to get out from under very quickly.
In court, Kirkland says usually the best she can do is get their payments stretched out over decades, what the attorneys here call the slow bleed.
Some of these people will be paying $5 or $10 on their debt until the day they die.
We wanted to ask hospital officials about their prices and all of those lawsuits.
CBS News.
We were told to make an appointment.
I'd like to see if he'd be willing to speak with us on camera. Okay. For the story. Okay.
The next week, they turned us down. Instead, they sent us a statement saying they try to work with patients, but some individuals refuse to engage with us to resolve their balances. Litigation is always a last resort and used only, they said, for patients who can afford some level of payment. Meanwhile, Casey Roberts has a large, painful lump growing on her shoulder.
I have not been to the doctor. I can't afford it.
Do you think people like yourself should be having to make those choices?
It shouldn't be that choice. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in.
In its statement, Flowers Hospital told us it offers interest-free payment plans for some patients and looks to see if they're eligible for charity care or Medicaid. The Roberts faced a default judgment on this case in January, essentially a court order to pay, but they have since contacted Legal Services of Alabama, and attorneys there got that judgment overturned. By the way, you know that the hospital said that they, offer options to people, and that the problem is that people don't respond. But they were paying, and when they got the initial bill, she said that she reached out to the hospital 3 times, twice on the phone and once in person, and every time she says she was told they would call her back, and they never did, according to her. So, you know, they paid what they could, and this is where they wound up.
But this breaks my heart. She knows that there's another medical condition that she needs to get a doctor to look at, and she would rather not than have to deal with an additional bill. That is so wrong.
Yeah, and you know, the people wind up feeling guilty. You know, she feels guilty, she told us, because she feels like she's putting her family through this, because she went into the hospital for an emergency, and that's, as she says, that's my bill, and now she feels like her whole family is burdened because of an emergency room bill for an appendectomy, which if you don't have an appendectomy, you're going to die.
You don't survive. Yeah.
If your appendix bursts,
need an example of the system being broken, I think this is a fine example. How widespread is this practice? Do you know of suing patients?
If you were to just do a quick search on the internet of hospital lawsuits and medical debt, you'd find that this is happening around the country. You know, we're kind of giving you the small story to sort of amplify the whole, but this is not by any means just happening in Dothan, Alabama. This is happening around the country. More and more people are getting sued. There are other stories, even of people going to jail over medical debt. We've read some of those stories that other outlets have published. So this is a widespread problem. From what we're hearing from the advocates in Dothan, they say that they see it happening more often to people down there from the hospitals. And as the attorney said, the best sort of payment plan they can put them on is what they call the slow bleed, meaning you bleed slowly, you paying till you die, essentially.
I was just going to say that. I'm sure a lot of people sort of pass away and still have that huge medical bill.
That's what the attorneys told us at Legal Services.
You know what? It's an election year, folks. A lot of candidates want your vote. You should find out what their point of view is on whether or not this healthcare system needs to be fixed.
And one thing I would say to people, look for a nonprofit legal services entity in your community. The Roberts, were not aware of Legal Services of Alabama. We said, have you ever gone to Legal Services of Alabama? And they said, what's that? So in many of these communities, in many states, in many cities, you're going to have a nonprofit legal services group. Make sure that you understand that this is a nonprofit group, and then go to them and say, look, I can't afford my debts. Can you help me?
Right.
And in a lot of cases, they can help a lot of people.
Well, that is
good
to know.
Just to have somebody to go into court and at least try to argue for you or negotiate for you or help you work out something that you can afford, that you can manage.
Anna, I'm so happy you're doing this series. Thank you so much.